Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are at the moment. Welcome to this session, where the second session of today. This is where we are going to change a little bit of our gear again and focus on a new topic. This time it's going to be about the assessment and how we are going to review where countries are in digitizing their assessment procedures and whether the digitalization is leading to innovation in assessment. This is actually one of the chapters in the Digital Education Outlook. And in this session, we are going to start with a presentation from my colleague analyst here at OECD, Quentin Vidal, who will give the overview of that chapter in the publication. After that, we will have three exciting examples from three countries that are already quite progressed in digitizing one or another part of their national assessment. We'll first go to New Zealand with Jansen from the Curriculum Center. He will tell about their experiences. After that, we'll move to the Nordic countries, starting with Peter Carberry from National Agency for Education in Sweden. And then we'll move to Finland, where Matti, Lattu, Matriculation Examination Board will share their experiences in digitizing certain parts of the assessment. The way we're going to do this is that we're going to have the introductory presentations from all the panelists to start with. And after that, we'll move to a question and answer session. For this, you have a tab of questions at the platform. I would really encourage you to use that tab and pose questions to the audience. Not to the audience, but to the speakers. It went a little bit wrong way around. So ask questions to the speakers, and I will be picking up your questions then at the question and answer session. But I may also use my own questions to poke the brains of our speakers. So that's the plan. We have right about 55 minutes left of it, so I will stop here and give the floor to Quentin, who will give us the key findings in this regard in our Digital Education Outlook. Quentin.
Thanks, Tia, for this introduction. So let me share my screen. Do you see the right one or the wrong one?
The right one.
Okay. So welcome to this new session of the online conference on digital education. So as Tia said, I'm an analyst here at the OECD, and I've been part of the team that produced the two digital education outlooks in 2021 and now in 2023. And today it will be my pleasure to give you an overview of one of the chapters I contributed to for this outlook, namely the one on digital assessment. So if you attended the first day of the online conference, it will not be the first time you see this chart. And one thing you may have taken away from the sessions yesterday is the observation that countries are still very much on their way towards the digital transformations. So why are we saying this? Well, we're saying this because in 2021, with the first outlook, we've had a look at the frontiers of technology, and we have explored how and what was the transformative potential of new technology and smart uses of data to imagine what digital transformation may look like in education and what opportunities it could bring for system and school management, for teaching and learning, and of course for assessment. And so naturally, 2 years later, in 2023, with this new outlook, we were interested in seeing where countries stand on this journey. And what we observed is that among the 29 countries and jurisdictions for which we have comparable information, for the most part, countries are still very much in the middle on the spectrum. They have embarked on the digitization or the digitalization of some of their systems and practices, but countries are only rarely making the most of the digital tools to transform existing practices. And in this session, we will take the example of assessment to illustrate this. So what are we talking about and what did we observe? On the one hand, we looked at the national evaluations in countries and jurisdictions. That's the one that carry low stakes for students because they are used by countries to monitor their system and their schools. More and more countries have this type of national evaluations now, and most of them are taken digitally. As of 2023, it's the case in 18 jurisdictions out of 29. On the other hand, we looked at the national examinations. So they are the ones that carry high stakes for students because they impact their trajectory, their academic and professional trajectories. And here we found that only 7 out of the 29 jurisdictions had digitalized some part of their national or central examinations. And why this difference? Well, it has to do with the characteristics of those two types of assessment. As you can see on the left side of this slide, national evaluations are the assessments that students can take at any time. So you can use the same laptops for several students, for example, so you don't need so much of a comprehensive hardware infrastructure to administer them, compared to exams that are usually taken simultaneously in more controlled settings to maintain equity. Then it is also because evaluations are cyclical and usually identical from one year to the next for monitoring regions. So there are higher incentives to digitize and replicate them than there are for exams. Another difference is the fact that evaluations usually assess a narrow range of subjects, so typically the language of the country, mathematics, and science, and typically with closed-ended questions, which are easy to digitize, while on the contrary, exams tend to cover a broader range of subjects with more advanced and specific content, which makes it more difficult to ensure their validity and reliability. And finally, another interpretation is the idea that perhaps countries are using their national evaluations to as a first step towards the digitalization of their assessment ecosystem, because they carry lower stakes than exam. It's easier to promote innovation than it is for exams. Finally, a third type of tools that we looked at, but we will not focus too much on them today, is the broad range of tools that support the administration of assessments, whether they are paper-based or computer-based. For example, to support grading or the transfer of grades across different system management tools, or to help teachers design their own assessments, etc. And it turned out that in 16 jurisdictions out of 29 countries were providing their schools and their teachers with this type of tools. So what does this picture suggest? Well, indeed, it suggests that countries are digitizing the simplest things first, and that they are only on their way towards a digital transformation. And when you look at the global picture, this outlook does show that many countries have developed and implemented digital tools to move towards innovative assessment ecosystems, but only a fraction of them make the most of the digital affordances. But even if it's the case today, even if the digital assessment doesn't make the most of the new technology yet, well, the infrastructure is there and it can be upgraded to seize their potential, and we will talk about it later in this session. But I will stop here, and I will now leave it to my colleagues from New Zealand, Sweden, and Finland to present the interesting approaches their countries have come up with to digitalize their assessment ecosystems. Thanks, and back to you, Tia.
Thank you, Quentin. That's an interesting overview of where countries have indeed started the digitalization of assessment. So indeed, let's continue our tour and go to Liam and New Zealand. So you're going to talk to us about the assessment tool for teaching and learning that you've been working on, and it has an interesting acronym. I am not even going to try to pronounce it. Maybe you will tell us how to pronounce it.
I will do that. Thank you very much, Tia. Roa ko, thank you, Quentin. Before I disclose how to pronounce the acronym, allow me to open my kōrero quickly with opening karakia. Mātaia ho tahu nui, mātaia ho tahu roa, e te pouwānanga e hora nei. Ko wai au, ko wai tēnei ihu hupi atua ki nei, he Principal Advisor ki te tāhuhu o te mātauranga o Aotearoa. My name is Liam Jansen. I'm a Principal Advisor at the Ministry of Education in New Zealand, and the acronym for our tool is pronounced ESTL, and on the screen here you can see how it is written in full. It is our electronic assessment tool for teaching and learning. In the report, ESTL is talked about, and that's what I'm going to be sharing about here for the 10 minutes quickly to give you a brief overview of some of its features, some of the purposes of the tool. I'd like to talk a little bit about the functionality of the tool, because I think when I attend talks like this, it's always good to get a little bit of a look underneath the hood, and also its inception as a tool when it was first developed and released to schools in New Zealand, which I think is a big part of what ESTL is. It was a pioneering tool when it was first released in the early 2000s. So I'll talk a little bit about this. Some of the opportunities that it gives for the schooling sector in New Zealand, and then some of where we're at with the ministry and shifting towards our future state of the assessment. You were talking about digitalisation, Quentin, and how it leads to innovation. So I'm happy to cover that as well. So a brief overview of ESTL. In the chart that you just shared, Quentin, I would deem that ESTL is kind of an assessment tool for learning, which was one area, but also the low stakes assessment as well. It is optional, it is not mandated, it is free for New Zealand schools to use. So it's fully provided by the Ministry of Education. There's also PLD training workshops and direct service that schools can request, and that's done through a provider that the ministry funds, and that's also free. You can see some options of some of the supports available to school there. And it's been available for nearly 20 years now. When it was first released, it was just called ESTL, not ESTL. The electronic came after, when it shifted from CD-ROM to being digital. And here are some of the purposes of what ESTL is. At this point, I'd like to also acknowledge the dualism between the formative and summative purposes of assessment tools. I spoke with John Hattie prior to this talk, who also talked about Michael Scriven's view on formative and summative assessment, that it's not necessarily the tool itself that can be one or the other, but instead it's how it is implemented and used in a schooling system that determines how it works in that situation. So ESTL is able to be used as a formative tool. We do see trends that it's used as a summative tool as well. We know this by observing peak periods in the middle of the school year and at the end of the school year, which suggests that it might be quite tied to summative reporting to parents or reporting for schools board of trustees and other things. So the disparity in practice would exist with the tool, and by providing that PLD, we're hoping to shift, and lots of that PLD is targeted towards using the tool for more formative purposes, such as the ones that you see on the screen here. Like I said, I want to pop the hood of ESTL a little bit to give a brief run through of some of the things that ESTL can do and provide for New Zealand schools. It is a testing tool, so you can see here it's creating, it's assigning, and then it's administering those tests and viewing those reports. In the lead up to this kōrero as well, I know that the OECD were interested in its integration, so I'll cover that in this part as well. So the way that makes ESTL quite unique is that it doesn't have a stock standard list of tests as such. Instead, it's got a bank of items that teachers, when they come into the tool, log in, go to create a test, and you've got these customizationable options here. When teachers have input all their customizations, the tool then does its thing and it goes through the item bank and it creates a bespoke test for that fits that particular purpose. So this model was developed in the early 2000s and it was really pioneering of its time, and that work was led by John Hattie. There's also a function that teachers can go through and review the tests that the tool has created for them and choose to replace particular questions if for some reason, students might have already seen those kind of questions. For assigning the tests, so once you've created a test, it sits there in the bank for your school to view, and it can be assigned to individuals or groups of students. And just on here is a valid time to talk about the integration capabilities of ESTL. It is not that future focused with its current functionality of how it integrates. It can only integrate with SMS systems, and it's done manually. So you can see here the import of student data to ESTL from the SMS needs to occur through an AST file, which needs to be done manually and is often done at the start of the schooling year. And then once tests have been set and test results have been collected by ESTL, it can then be shared back into the SMS via a tabular report that can get generated by the tool. Tests can be reassigned so they can stay in that bank if there's a particular test that has been created by a teacher, and it can be recycled year after year if schools want to get really consistent data for particular cohorts that might be coming through, so they can monitor and track their school that way. Administer the test. Students can either go in and sit it on paper base, that option is available, or there's also a student portal available where it can be done on screen. And all of those are supported by administration guidelines that are provided. Here's a little peek at some of the items that sit within ESTL. You can see here that we've got English medium and Te Reo Māori medium items, which is the Indigenous language of New Zealand. You can see the number of items, and that's what the bank can pull from when those customizations are created. Writing's a little bit different. It's kind of like there's a writing prompt that gets provided and the students just respond to the prompt. So it's not really responding to multi-choice or short answer questions. It's done a little bit differently. And it's only paper-based for writing. Marking the test. So if it's done online and it's a closed question, it can be done automatically. Otherwise, some supports can be provided for open questions. And of course, if the test was administered paper-based, they have to be manually input into ESTL, which is the teacher's favorite part of the process. And then the incentive for inputting your results into the tool is to access some of these tabular reports, or some of the reports that are available from ESTA. A large range of PDFs available, as well as the tabular. You can see here there are some reports that look at progress over time, and there are some that dive deeper into the specific what was found out in that test. Here you can see that the progression statements for what the strengths and gaps were, what the overall score was, where that student compares into the mean of New Zealand in the middle, and then a peek of what one of the tabular reports can look like that can get downloaded, and this would be the one that's imported into the SMS system. So that was kind of like what it is. To speak a little bit about the inception of ESTL, its core development occurred between 2000 and 2008. Following that, it was developed in partnership between the University of Auckland and the Ministry of Education during that time. After about 2008, it was handed to the ministry, and further developments occurred with the implementation of the student portal and other enhancements to the progressions for the writing. And then there was a period of enhancements about 2008 to 2012. Following that, there's been a period of not so much changes to the tool, which is why we're looking at it again now for the innovation that was talked about with Quentin earlier. The items were all developed during that time period that we saw on the screen earlier, and as I said, it was first released on CD-ROM, and just you can see a little bit of a comparison to the first screen, the first interface for creating a test, and one that's currently in development for a future release that we're working on at the moment for what it could look like. As well, I've just got a quote here from Field of Dreams to speak to the nature of its development. And speaking to John Hattie, who was leading the development, he shared about a specific conversation that occurred in it being a nationwide test, having to balance the needs of what's in the classroom for teachers, what are their needs, and then what are the needs for ministers, and getting national data for monitoring the system. And there was a conversation about mandating that assessment tool when it was first developed. The developers were against the mandating, with the notion of, please just trust us. If we do it right, the teachers will come and they will use the tool, and we will have access to that data to be able to monitor the system. It wasn't mandated, and it hasn't been mandated yet. And uptake of the tool started at about 60% of schools using it, and that's maintained quite consistent between 50 and 60% of New Zealand schools using ESTL. Briefly, some of the opportunities that are provided for ESTL, or just having a digital assessment tool. If you're taking notes, I encourage you to note down the title of this article that I've attached here. It's a really good case study that we released on our Education Gazette quite recently of Te Waiwatu School and how they're using ESTL in a formative way in their Poutah. As well as that, of course, recently we had our COVID lockdowns, and ESTL allowed some continuity there if schools chose to want to be able to do that, with ESTL and ESTL being available as a digital tool that can be accessed at home without having to do paper deliveries to the letterbox. So with this, when the lockdown occurred, the ministry worked in partnership with Evaluation Associates to release a series of guidances, videos, PDF supports for how that could be done, because we have kind of promoted the student portal. Some kids know how to log on, but necessarily actually using it at home, and if it was appropriate during that time as well. And then I've got some notes on some of the changes that we're wanting to make with the ESTL as we shift towards the future, but I feel like that might be some conversation I keep banked away for a little bit for our roundtable discussions that's coming up soon. Cool. Tia, I'm happy to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Liam. I think you took us to a little bit of a time traveling with when you talked about the CD-ROM, and I thought that, okay, probably our audience is of the age that we remember those times, but if we had real school children here, they would be wondering what we talk about.
Yeah, I won't share how old I was when ESTL was first released.
Okay. Okay, thank you for this. This was a really interesting example. Let's move to Sweden. Peter, you have been also working on your national student tests and digitizing them. I'll give the floor to you. You're muted for the time being.
Does this work better?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. So Federico will do my slides. So can you go back? I think you started at page 3. But let's start this. The question was, is it transition or transformation? And I think perhaps we are mostly into transition, but we're also trying to take some small steps in transformation. Next, please. It's important to know that we have been doing national tests in compulsory school, upper secondary, all schools actually, for many years. They are still mainly analog. You do it on paper, but essays in the upper grades have been done on computers since, I think, 2018. But we have national tests, as you can see from the slide, from grade year 3 in compulsory up to tests for Swedish for immigrants, which are often adults, We can take the next. The purpose of this test has always been to support equal and fair grading, and they are not exams, but they are somewhat high stakes in the sense that teachers are supposed to use the grading they get from the national tests as a sort of important indicator on the level of the student's knowledge. But if they find that the student have shown knowledge otherwise that are better than the test, they are allowed to give a different grade. But they have to be able to sort of show some evidence on that. In grade 3, we have no grading, so then it's more a checkpoint because it's are the first 3 school years, and it's very important that everybody should have learned how to read and write, basic math, things like that, and this is to support teachers and schools to sort of check, do we succeed in that? Next. As I said, those assessments are supporting for grading. They are not exams. Traditionally, they have been assessed. The tests have been assessed by the student's own teacher, and we try to make them more on quality of student performance rather than just determining if you can tick off the right answer. This is done mostly by actually all those tests. There are not in all subjects, but in a number of subjects are produced by university institutions. So they have a huge base of knowledge about how to create tests like this and do that several years in a row. So they are very good at this. We can take the next. So when the government gave us the task to transform this into digital tests instead, it was the first goal was to sort of increase the fairness and legal certainty of the marking assessment. We have a problem, and I will not go into that you can talk about grading inflation. So we really need to be sure that we can give some kind of evidence on that grading is fair. So there is 4 measures that is supposed to bring about this. A bigger part of the test can now be automatic marked, assessed, because it becomes digital. We moves towards national scoring so that the student solutions are not marked by their own teacher, which could be biased, and instead it could be by any other teacher in the same subjects. And this is also achieved by anonymizing the responses, which is also possible through the digital environment. And important also when it comes to fairness is that we have gone about to actually make tests more accessible, and it's very easy to see that if you can magnify the text or whatever, if you need that, that it's possible to do in a digital environment. It's not possible to do on paper. Next. The second goal that the government set up was to reduce teachers' workload. It's very common. This is, I mean, if you're a 9th grade teacher in Swedish, you have these national tests every year and have to work spend a lot of time. So that is sort of a big workload for teachers. So we try to achieve this through making distribution much easier. I mean, now nobody have to distribute papers in the schools, and they don't have to have this pile of tests to take home and assess. Instead, this could be done through the digital system. The automatic marking assessment is also supposed to bring some release for teachers, because then perhaps 50% of the test is already marked. And we also try to make it easier for them to make use of the test results, because in the paper-based world, they first have to mark all the tests, and then they have to report that into a digital system, or sometimes even several digital systems. Now everything will be done within the system. So the result is already there when you have marked the parts that are marked by a teacher. Next. So we created, and it's important to say, we haven't started yet. We created a digital test service. Next, I think. So this is based on a digital platform for the actual test. But around this, we have created a test service. That means that we ask the owner of schools, municipalities, or independent schools. They are supposed to provide parts of the are being active in part of the system. So we have an identity and access management, which is based on the fact that it is the schools and the school owners that knows who should participate. So they will have to provide us with information about both students that should participate and also which school staff that should be involved. They have to do this, and we have created the possibility to do this machine to machine if the owner wants that. If it's a very small entity, they can use a more file-based way of doing this. But we hope for most bigger ones that they will use this possibility for machine-to-machine provisioning, we call it. And then we have created a system where we have federated login, which means that it's sort of a single sign-on system, you could say, that a student will use their own sort of digital identity in the form of password to their local system in the school. That will be enough for them to be able to log into the test. For teachers, we have added the security thing so that they have to have a digital EID added on that. The system also consists of construction. This is actually part of the platform. Construction of tests. So the university institutions are working within the platform to create tests, and they can also test questions and do a lot of things like that. The delivery will be totally web-based, so you just go to a link and then you log in as a student or as a teacher. As I mentioned, assessment will be partly automatic and some manual. And then the schools can take out the results. The teachers and the principals. What we have not achieved yet, hopefully will be later, is a more easier way for for those who owns many schools, like municipalities, to also be part of this, to get out statistics and so things like that. Today, already in this first version, they will only have the possibility to get that out at school level. Next. There are, of course, a lot of challenges. We have had a lot of those. The agency has never before been a service provider of a system like this. We have some e-services, but they are much smaller and much easier. And so it's a very challenging thing to have this massive IT project. As I mentioned already, school owners are suddenly involved in this process. They were not earlier. Next. And of course, which is important, this, in order to make sure that it is not the students' digital competence that are measured in the test, it is their knowledge in the respective subject. They have to have a certain degree of digital competence. This is just to show you how we're planning to roll this out, starting 2024, and all of them will be on from 2026. Next. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That's another interesting example, and I really like the fact that you made very clear that what were the policy goals for this. So there was a reason for clear reasons for doing this: fairness of marking and reducing the workload of teachers. Okay, let's move to Finland, which is an example of a high-stake exam that has been digitized. So Matti, your turn.
Right. Greetings from Finland. I'm Matti Lattu. I work as a product owner in the Matriculation examination board. So I work daily between our stakeholders, so schools, item authors, and people who score the exams, and the development team. So we have still developed team of 15 people working in our project and doing development. So where we sit is here. So in Finland we have first 9 grades which are common for all kids, and after the 9th grade you select vocational goal or upper secondary, so academic side. So our exam sits after the upper secondary. So about half of the student population goes through our exam, and it's high stakes exam in a way that the universities are using our scores in their student selection. So it's for these upper secondary students, it's very important to get good grades in our exam. And they say that when you start the upper secondary in your first year, so from the first hour, first lesson, the teacher are stressing that you have to remember this in the matriculation examination. This is where we are, and I started to work with this digital matriculation examination in 2013. So at that time, there was like 2 reasons for this, which was spoken out. So the first rule was that the use of IT in upper secondary schools was very, very low, and these are quotations from a report from those days, and it draws a picture of a school which was sort of behind of the rest of the society. It wasn't so much about that we were afraid that the learning outcomes wouldn't be good, but it was more like the students felt that a teacher who was still using an overhead projector and these old style slides was maybe a bit like past days. So the first reason for this making this exam digital was that we wanted to get teachers a motivation to use IT in schools. So in a way, our exam, which sits after the upper secondary, it was sort of a plug that was preventing teachers to use the IT in their teaching and learning. And if you think of the progressive teacher who really wanted to like go ahead with the society, he or she didn't like, maybe they felt that there were no reasons because the students wouldn't benefit in the final exam of any of their skills in the IT. So that was sort of goal one. And the second goal was, of course, coming from the curriculum. So there has been a increasing stress and importance of skills. So you have to like use process data and do all kinds of stuff, not just memorizing things. And of course, when you have just grid paper and pencil, and we have very little possibilities to give you material for the exam situation, then the items in the exam or the questions can't be very like process or skill oriented. So that was the reason number two. So we can make a better exams to like make items which give those students who really have the capabilities of utilizing their skills in processing different kind of material and data, for example, in the sciences. So they could show that how good they are. So those were the main reasons to do this, and sort of take the plug away and give the schools and teachers to reason to go forward. So how the upper secondary schools in Finland look like right now? So all students who go to the upper secondary, they get their laptop. For most of the students coming from the comprehensive schools, the laptops are free, like all the material, and all the students they will get them from sort of day one, and almost all the learning material is digital because they have their laptop. So why don't use the digital learning materials? The screenshot you have in the middle, it's from our exam system. So this is the view that test taker is really seeing. So as you see, there's a browser, and they're on the left. You can see the question item, and on the right side there's a video attached to the problem. So this is taken from the student's perspective. So in the exam situation, the students, they have a sort of real laptop in front of them. It's not just a form you do the answer your answer to the items, but on there are like more than 20 different applications like spreadsheet and symbolic calculators and whatever drawing and image editors to work with. So for example, in this where there's a video of bird feeding machine, it was something that you have to calculate that how quickly these seeds are going through the system and something like that. So the video was telling that, okay, this is the experiment, and then you have to do something calculating. So from the day one that our item authors, they say that we don't want any electronic typewriters to the exam. So we want a real computer with all these applications the test takers, the candidates can use. So this is what we have right now. So Technically, it's a Linux which is booting from the USB stick. So all the students, they have during the exam, they have the same applications they can use. So then I have like 3 lessons from these years. So as I said, we started 2013, and the first electronic exams were in 2016, and we started with deciding about the schedule. So this is really like done and after like 3 or 4 months after we started, and we thought that it's very important to make a decision about this. It's not like something that, okay, we try this and that. What we made a decision that we start with the very like 3 subjects which had very small number of test takers. So it was very easy for the schools to arrange these electronic exams in their schools. And then we grew from these small subjects to the bigger ones. And finally, in the end, we ended up stopping with the mathematics, which was, of course, the most complex because of these notation things and everything like that. So that was something that you don't have to do it in a one big bang, but just work gradually. And then it was the second thing which our item authors were facing, that how could you like learn to make these electronic exams? So they had a strong tradition of paper-based exams, and we were working with them by arranging different kind of conferences to like feed their imagination. And of course, this gradual progress within subjects helped them because they could see that what their colleagues were doing, who were sort of going public, publishing their exams, how they were doing and what kind of feedback they got. And it was very important for them to think that it wasn't the main goal for this wasn't to like change everything. So you don't have to impress the test takers in this high stakes exam. You have to measure them. So this is the most important. It doesn't matter if it's the first rounds is almost like it would be paper based, because it calms people down and let them go like in they don't have to worry. And the third one was maybe the most important for this success. So we made this assessment platform available for all these teachers and schools for free. And this was because we wanted to get the feedback from the software we were developing. So this was like one rule, but also it was very important in a way of communication, that the teachers were afraid that what are these digital exams going to look like? Okay, you can make your own exams. You can try with your pupils, and you can give ideas for those item authors who are making the real sort of exams. So currently, during the last 12 months, I just calculated the stats that more than like 140,000 exams have been carried out in this ABITI system by the upper secondary schools, and we don't have any idea what kind of exams they have, but they are all, over 2 million answer papers received by our system. So it really calmed out because you don't have to worry about, you can act, and that was very important. So we were also asked that what we are trying to do in the near future. Our local arrangements with this current system are very complex. So you have to have a lot of networks and all these USB sticks and everything. We want to get rid of those. There's a government program for the oral sections for foreign language exams, which is so technically quite easy to carry out in the electronic system. And there's also plans to add English as an exam language along with the Finnish and Swedish. So this is what we have doing during the last years. Thanks.
Thank you, Matti. I thought that was an interesting example of a case where you can see that the assessment, changing the assessment, can drive really the contents of what happens before the assessment, the teaching and so methods and so on. Could I have all the panelists on screen right now? I realized that we're basically running out of time already. And there were quite a few questions from the audience, and I think many of you have responded to many of those questions. But can I just start with Quentin? There was a question about the definition of digital assessment, and that are we really just talking about moving the exams or evaluations to digital format, or are we transforming them? I think this is transforming the assessment, and I think this is something that was reflected in the publication. So if you could say a few words about that. What's digital assessment for us?
Yes. Yeah. So indeed, when we about the terminology, so when we talk about digital assessments, it's any assessment that can be taken with a digital device. So whether it's online or offline, or whether it's on taken on an intranet server, as is the case in Finland, or on the internet as a whole, it's any type of assessment that is taken with a digital device. And indeed, to reflect on the question that was asked on the transition versus transformation, we observe that as it stands today, as of 2023, most uses of digital assessments are implemented to replicate analog assessments with digital devices. And even if you think about the most innovative tools like proctoring systems, for example, well, they are put in place to replicate the conditions of an in-person exam. And it's a bit of a missed opportunity, because there are many things that digital assessments allow you to do, and they can be adaptive, personalized. We will talk about it later today in another session, but they assess new skills and in different ways that paper and pencil do not allow you to do so. It will be it's interesting to see how countries will move towards this transformation.
Okay, I see that we have basically 4 minutes left. I'm going to give a challenge to our panelists from the countries. If you have 1 minute, or let's say 40 seconds, to give a message to those who are considering doing the same thing that you've done, what would be the message you would give them, the lesson you've learned from this, or the key issue they should pay attention to when they start? Let's start with Peter.
Well, we made a choice several years ago to build a web-based service. There is good arguments for that, but there are also arguments not to, because in Sweden, for all other assessment at school level, they have their own platforms. They buy. We have several, even Swedish companies producing things like that. So now it will become the situation that there are at least 2 different platforms for doing tests at the school level. The one they have by themselves, and the one the national agency provides. Question is, you could think of actually just distributing the test questions and let them use the platform that they are keen on. But that's just my personal opinion on that. But that is an alternative that makes it easier from the national level, I think.
Yes,
did I make 40 seconds?
Yeah, it makes it easier for national actors, but what about indeed the school level? Liam.
Kia ora.
You're muted.
Oh, someone must have unmuted me at the same time I tried to do it. my advice for countries that would be thinking of digitizing their assessment tools and developing new ways of assessment is to start with the curriculum. Think about the long-term pathway and how learners are transitioning between those different environments and what are the needs that assessment can support with in terms of what are the progressions of what learners are needing to understand, what's the learning that can't be left to chance, what is the curriculum saying about lifelong learners for your country, and then use assessments to come in and support that so that it is curriculum driving assessment, not the other way around.
Okay, that's very clear. Alignment. Matti?
So first, clarify what you are trying to do and why. So clarify your goal, especially why you want to go digital. And then my advice is to stop planning and start doing, because I've talked with a lot of people from different countries, and I had a feeling that they are trying to plan the whole thing before they start. And it's my experience, it's not going to work that way.
Yeah, I think in your presentation, you already said that you step by step, in a way, you don't have to do everything at one go. And I thought that was kind of perhaps makes the task less daunting if you think of it that way. Thank you very much. I think we could have used another hour on this for the discussion part, and I couldn't even use my questions, not let alone the questions that the audience had. But I think this was a good opening for the conversation, and I'm certain that this will continue. And as Quentin already referred to, our future program, there will be another session where we will continue to talk about assessment, where OECD offers one alternative. We launch our platform for innovative learning assessments in 1 hour, I think. But before that, there is another session, so we need to wrap up here. Thank you very much to Liam, Peter, Matti, and Quentin for your presentations. And I will be curious to know if you will get some questions in private via email or so on after this session. Thank you, and hope to see you in the next sessions as they come.
Thanks, Tia.
Yeah. So before we go live, Stephanie, thanks for that. Before we go live, I'm going to share it again. I'm going to check that it's full screen again, and then we'll do the 5-second countdown. So I'm just waiting for Simon to let
So you do it again once, right?
Exactly.